basic background on other than that, like you're her daughter and you got into the business, of how you got into this business, and like give me the 5 minutes of the history of Emerald Escrow.
Okay. I started in escrow in 1978 for small independent in Fullerton, and moved to Corona, went to work for a title company, Transamerica. Just about everybody in the escrow industry at some point in time has worked for Transamerica. I went to Emerald in 1980 and I purchased it, and I've been the manager owner of Emerald ever since. Emerald started off as a little two-person office in Norco. It was there to handle the Sky Country track up in off of Limonite and Mariloma, if you know that area. I got involved with tracks way back when. I remember we were handling little resales, small amount of business, and I wanted to do tracks. So I started sending out letters to every developer that was building in Riverside County. My letters were unsophisticated, two-liners. I was 28 years old, and I just wanted their business. One day I got a call back from the Donald Brin Company. And Gordon Hicks, he was the marketing manager, said to me, quote, "I'm so goddamn tired of that stupid escrow company I work with, I'm going to give you a shot." So my first track came in about 81, 82 from the Donald Brin Company. And from that, for the next 10, 15 years, I did primarily tracks and grew the office with escrow officers. So just, at the right place at the right time, and a lot of hard work and a lot of long hours. Annie came to work with me when she was a week old in a bassinet.
We don't believe in maternity.
Yeah, she sat there next to my desk and until she was old enough. Oh my God, Steve.
You keep saying it's gonna fall no matter what. Maybe I should just hold it.
So that's my history. Sent Annie off to college, wanted her to go into anything but real estate. School teacher, accountant, nurse, please do anything but real estate. And she came back and has been by my side ever since. So.
For me, I was at her side for the whole time, and then went away to college, came back, did real estate, decided I hate showing houses on the weekends and kissing buyers' butts, and I got sucked into this escrow thing. It's like a leech. It just takes you in, but I loved it because I like closing deals. I don't like the showing houses and that part of it, so I love it. So now I've just teamed up with my mom, and we do a little bit of everything. We're very adaptable escrow company. We've done the HUDs, the REOs, refis, mobile homes, everything. So this is just our life. We're boring. This is escrow.
You're boring. No,
Yeah.
no. You guys have like all the most exciting stuff that happens. You're not getting audio? You guys have all the most exciting stuff that happens in the industry. Like the stories Jim tells me that he brings you are like, I realize that Jim is more of a troubled client and he has more ridiculous stuff. But we have lately, I'm sure we've had all kinds of weird
Yes,
crap
you
that's come
do.
through, especially this last major mess that we had.
As I sit here listening to all of you guys talk about how you gather your deals, how you market, how you get your properties, how you wholesale, you've got a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of pump. I'm, as I told Tiffany, the boring paper pusher behind the desk. Jim brings me a deal, and I've taught him now, run a prelim. If you're going to be interested in a piece of property, get a prelim. See who owns it. Are they dead? Are they alive? Are there 15 cousins in line? They're always dead, yeah.
I am the queen of dead people. Like I can read a prelim in 2 seconds. I know that 5 of them are dead.
Okay.
So that is something that Jim and I laugh. I mean, his deals are hard. They're difficult. There's a lot of time and effort put into it, and that's what we like to do behind our scenes. While you guys are out buying and selling and flipping and rehabbing, we're pushing paper and trying to clean up title and get it ready to close for you.
So a lot of people in this room, at least 50% of the people in this room, will have no idea what title, prelim, that entire process is.
Okay.
So the theme for the year, and I'll apologize, but I'll go off on random tangents all the time. So the theme for the year is essentially like, from the beginning to the end of a deal, of a flip or any real estate transaction. I know it's a little elementary, and you guys have a take sheet on your website, but most of the time when somebody has a deal in a contract, how do they bring it to you?
Most often, if there's an RPA, if it's written up by a licensed agent, they submit us the purchase contract along with the earnest money deposit. Jim brings his in on a napkin, literally. He sits in front of my desk. He tells me who the players are, what the price is, what the terms are, the link, and I ask a series of questions. I know that a lot of you have your contracts that you issue to your clients that they sign. Those are what you give to us. From there,
But you don't have to. You don't have to have
no,
a contract.
you can sit in front of us.
You can sit
yeah.
in front of us. I would say some people just come in and say, this is the transaction, and then we create our escrow instructions, which become the contract, and that's where a lot of people get confused.
So you said I can just call you.
You can just call in
Randomly.
and say, but we want to meet both sides of the party. You know, we want to know.
You want both parties there.
Well, if you call in a transaction, we're going to
Shut the other one off.
We're
Good?
going to reach out to the other party, introduce ourselves, make sure that what you told us they're in agreement with, and then we'll proceed by typing the contract and the escrow instructions.
Okay, so you're a little intimidating, Donna.
I am.
Donna's a very smart lady, and she's a little intimidating at first.
Wait, is this button supposed to be up or down?
Up.
Okay, scary.
We got a hum. Good? All right. So you're a little intimidating, and Anna was gone during the first 6 months. I started, like, you hid in the back when you were pregnant, so I didn't really see you.
Yeah, it was not pretty.
So when I call your office, right now I get I'm like, hey, this person called me. And I just get put right through because I'm an existing client, right? And it's a really easy transaction.
We have caller ID now.
Yeah. Now it's at the new place? You mean you didn't have it before?
We have caller ID. So we know now when you call.
You're like, shit, Steven's on the phone. I don't want
Sometimes.
to talk to him. No, we do that. So
I know.
I'm like, oh, Thomas is calling again. Where'd he go? I'm just kidding. So a lot of people call us when they literally get a contract and they have zero idea what to do. So, and when we were talking about working with clients, even people from this club, you guys were talking about like what happens if, and you have a lot of escrow officers that have been with you. Like, how many escrow officers do you have on your team now?
I have 4 escrow officers.
5 now.
5, excuse me. I just hired a new one. And most of the girls in my office have been with me 25 years plus.
Okay, so we have some really senior people.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody's calling in to your office, what can they, a new company that's really customer and like customer sales forward, right? Like, because you're not customer sales forward, you have a book of a huge book of clients, and people bring you deals, and you're like, I know exactly what to do. Leave me alone. I'll close your deal, right? Yeah. So when somebody comes into your office right now, like, what do they expect?
I think I know where you're getting
like,
at
people
this.
are really
Okay.
intimidated by the idea of calling escrow.
So random Joe calls into our
Yes.
office. I'm an investor, or
Yes.
I'm somebody trying to sell my house. They will either get Donna or I. That's the first 2 people they're going to get.
They're going to get one of you.
They're going to get one of us.
Okay.
And then we ask them a series of questions. So we go, what are you trying to sell? What are your intentions? Basically just kind of talking about the transaction. And then we kind of figure out where to go from there.
I got a hot mic, Bruce, or I got a hum. Sorry,
I think
Anna.
I should not talk then.
No, you're good.
But yeah, so call in, basically the receptionist knows where to field that call to. So it goes to one of us, and then we go from there. Is this a mobile home, a 1031? Are you an investor, for sale by owner? And we basically go through a list of questions, asking them sales price, just basically just talk to them.
So anybody can just call in and
Yeah.
just have a deal. And
It's not like we have a checklist, but we do. We just talk to them and see what their intentions are and how to proceed, and we'll guide them in the right way. Or
I realize this sounds ridiculous, but like a lot of people I get this question from, and so I'm only clarifying it because people come to me and they're like, "Wait, you mean I can just call them? I don't have to know these people." Like, they feel like they have to have a relationship with you prior to even calling.
No.
we get
And
a lot of calls.
I've actually had some investors in this group that I've met the last time that have come into my office, sat down with me, had a one-on-one, and we just kind of talked about what they're trying to do and where I fit into their program.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, if we have time to that. I would prefer, if you want to come in and sit down and like you, pick my brain for 30, 40 minutes, call me, I'll book time for you, and I will say, this is what, out of your program, out of what you're doing, this is our piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And we do. We are not intimidating, Steve, but we're the numbers person. We're the pits. We have no room to have errors. We are the ones that have to make sure that when it closes, you've got your money, he's got his house,
We also
and it's clear.
non-biased. I think non-biased is a really important part of that transaction.
Yeah.
You don't have room to sell one direction or the other. You have to be non-biased. So you have to ask the
Correct.
appropriate questions.
Right.
And sometimes those appropriate questions are like, I have no idea because I'm new.
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And that's kind of our spot. It's not your job as the buyer to ask the seller all these personal
Yeah.
questions. I mean, you should know who you're working with, but at the end of the day, we call them. We're going to call them. So when you open a transaction, say you take one of our take sheets and you fill it out and you email it to me, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the seller and say, hey,
The other party.
this is Anna, or the other party, and say, this is Anna and Donna Emerald Escrow. Introduce ourselves, figure out what their situation is, figure out who's dead, who's alive, who's in Oregon, who's in California. So we are problem solvers, and we talk to the people. It's not just, we're not just a paper pusher.
That's when Donna's
makes
like,
us
"Oh, paper
sound
push." I'm like,
humble.
"It's not paper pushy." And like,
But that's also how you close the deal. You have to get a little personal with them. You have to make them feel comfortable, because a lot of the times your investment deals, maybe somebody older, and they're not going to feel comfortable with, this guy over here with his cool hair buying their house. So it's our job to make sure that they
have cool
know
hair.
what is happening, and, there's that level of comfort and honesty. So
okay, so in the purchase process, after they have a contract, they're calling you. You're running through what's missing. You're essentially giving them some feedback. Making contact with any person you need to make contact with. After you've done that, you make contact with these people, and we've sort of decided that these are the terms that everybody agrees upon. What's like the next step that people can expect after all parties are in the loop, I guess?
One of the most important parts is we run title. A title report issued by a title insurance company will tell you what is of record on that property, who owns it, what the taxes are, notice of pendencies, judgments, liens, everything. That's where we run into a lot of problems. The properties that you guys are dealing with, more often than not, are, I don't want to say distressed properties in the sense that they have something wrong with them, but they're unique situations. They're not being listed at top price at 6% commission, and mom and dad with the kids aren't moving in next week. They're investors. You're looking for deals. You're looking for people who want to make deals, and usually there's some type of background that goes with that. And as Jim well knows, when we run a title search on his property, we find out that the person who is signing the contract is really the niece of the guy who died 2 years ago. And we've got to figure out now how she's going to acquire clear title to sell it to you. We're figuring out that there's an IRS tax lien on the father who died. So these are all issues that are going to show up on the title search. So that's the first thing we do. We order the title search. As soon as I get it, I send it to my investor. We review it. We say, hey, we've got some issues on here. I've got to call the seller. I've got to dig into this, and where we go with that.
So you'll walk me through, if I'm new, the process of what a title
Yes.
report is and what the
Yes.
items are and what to do about
Yeah,
them.
that's the key factor on any of these deals, is getting that title report and seeing what the condition of your property is, if it's clear and clean and just ready to close escrow, or if you've got a lot of homework to do.
Okay, so obviously, for anybody who doesn't know, so just other than the finding the money, right, making sure the deal pencils correctly, having your contractor lined up, whatever, we still have a whole minefield of possible issues on a title report that escrow has to help work through.
Yes.
So, let's say we've gone through this title report and we've got some basic family issues, and maybe we have to go through some probate, and it's really a matter of just time, unless you're chasing down dead people, right?
Dead people are actually easier.
Yeah, the crackheads are a little harder to find.
It's like the tax liens and I would say probate. And
Yeah, what do you find is like the biggest? So when you pull a premium, what do you find like the biggest deal killers?
Oh, actually, uninsured deeds are really hard too.
Yeah.
Uninsured deeds are difficult, and what an uninsured deed means, when a deed is recorded between two people and it's not insured by a title company. For example, if I come to Steve and say, I'm going to deed my house to you. Here, I'm giving it to you, and then he has title to my house. 2 years from now, he goes to sell that house. He did not go through a title insurance company. They're going to come back and track down me, who signed that deed 2, 5, 10, 15 years ago. The title companies will not allow the escrow to close if there's a deed that's recorded on a property that was not previously insured by another title company. So we often are spinning our wheels because we are now looking for somebody who signed a deed anytime in the past, and we've got to find them. We've got to get them to sign an affidavit. So those people don't realize, when you do a lot of transfers of properties between family members, neighbors, friends, ex-wives, husbands, it really creates a cloud on title, and those issues have to be dealt with when you buy or sell a property. You can get a loan, but the title insurance company will not insure it. So there are circumstances where we simply can't find them. And the title company won't just roll over and say, okay, we're going to eliminate that condition. They want to know why. Why can't you find them? What were the circumstances when this deed recorded back in 1980? Are there any relationships between these people? Are there any heirs to this person who signed that deed? So the title companies are reasonable if you approach them with explanations of what took place. But by what took place, now we have to start asking questions to the seller. How did you get this property? Who did you get it from? Were you neighbors? So we just start digging and building a case to present to the title company so they will feel comfortable insuring it. The lenders will make you a loan, but if the title company won't insure your property, you're not getting that loan. So it's a two-step process. So we work closely with the title insurance companies on things like that, but that's a huge thing, is uninsured deeds. Trust, same thing. You're this, I'm this trustee of my trust. If I die tomorrow, my son handles all my paperwork. A lot of people aren't aware when the property is in a trust who the successors are that's going to handle that paperwork upon the death of people. So,
And you can't use a power of attorney on a trust.
yeah, so there's just,
No,
title's the key
Wait, I
thing.
didn't know that. Explain
no,
that.
you can't.
Oh, come on.
No,
You really
You
didn't
cannot
know
use a
that?
power
in
of
what
attorney trust.
capacity? So give me an example how that works.
You just can't.
What?
If you have,
I don't understand.
if
I
you're,
don't,
if
I don't
you-
understand.
If you own title in a trust,
Okay.
you die, your trust identifies who the successor trustee is.
Correct,
Maybe it's
yes.
going to be your child, your spouse, your mother.
Okay.
That successor trustee is the person who now has the authority to sign any deeds or to encumber your property.
Yes.
And that successor trustee is the only one. Now, if they're deceased,
Yes.
the trust usually provides for a secondary
Yes.
person. And we've had it where that person's been
Yeah.
deceased, and then it goes usually to a court or an attorney. But people will come in, and the successor trustee is not available. He's a brother who's, on crack, he's out of the country, he's in prison, and they have a power of attorney. Well, power of attorneys can be used for medical purposes, it can be used for bank accounts, it cannot be used to transfer real property on a trust. So,
Interesting.
another thing that you look at on title.
15 years in this business, I've never run the situation. I have no idea.
It happens a lot.
Which is exactly why. So, if you're worried about the weird fumbling or like our lack of professionalism on stage, I want people to clarify that, like, I don't know, I'm supposed to lean in the mic, Bruce. Sorry. I send Donna and Anna a contract, or somebody else does, and then I sign blank paperwork, and then they help me fill it in. Like, that's how,
We don't do that. This
like,
is going on YouTube.
like, no, I don't literally.
We would never do
I
that.
don't
That is
literally. I
like-
don't literally mean no.
Oh my
Okay,
God.
let me clarify. I don't literally mean the pages are blank. I literally mean I look at the paperwork
There's
and
trust.
and I go like this, and I just quickly review,
does do that,
and I
actually.
sign the documents and I close, because they like I'll go through a prelim and Donna's like, we did this, and I'm like, wait, all this happened and I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Like, and then so all of this stuff happens with them. So all of you that are worried about issues within your file not being resolved, like something you couldn't figure out, they're doing it. Like, I don't do it. I don't solve.
There's a lot of background that happens.
99% of the time, I get a phone call, once every 5 files about some weird thing?
I think the biggest thing is a lot of people may think, okay, I'm going to close in 5 days. This is a cash deal. And then the prelim comes in really ugly. So then that's when, we have to call you and say,
Yeah.
hey, sorry, we got to get a hold of all these people for uninsured deeds or trust issues. So we deal with all that. That's our job. But sometimes your timeline might be pushed out a little bit because of these issues.
Yeah.
So just be prepared. So that's why getting a listing prelim is great. Like, when Jim calls for a listing prelim, I'm like, thank you. Like, now we know what we're getting into when we start the transaction.
So we can call you for a listing prelim
Oh,
instead
yeah.
of title?
Yeah, you guys don't need to call the title company. You normally, some people call in, or they'll just email, and then if you have a title company of choice, and we'll order it for you, and then we hold it. So what we do is we start researching it, take a look, and we'll let you know and say, okay, these are the issues that we're going to have to face. We can start cleaning it up now. And then once the transaction actually becomes a transaction, then we've already done a lot of the pre-work.
So how do you avoid, let's say I'm brand new, right? And I have 42 deals, right? Because everybody's got a million deals if they're brand new, but they're not deals. How do you avoid someone calling for 42 listing prelims that are going nowhere and just sort of overworking escrow?
Well, like, you have to know your client. I mean, when we order a listing prelim from the title company, we're putting our name on it saying we've got a transaction that's going to go forward.
Yeah.
If we're working with a client that's coming to us and he's opened 5, 6, 10 listing prelims and he hasn't closed any deals, we're like everybody else. We're going to go, hey, we need to kind of,
Okay.
we kind of need to filter you out a little bit.
So someone doesn't have to worry about wasting your time. You're going to tell them, like, look, like, you need to go back and look at these because we're 10 deep and nothing's gone anywhere.
the same thing. You can go out, you can get a property profile from a title company. A property profile will at least show you, and anybody can order a property profile from a title insurance company. It will give you the recorded documents on the property, who's of record, who owns it, if there's any deeds of trust on the property. It's not going to tell you if there's any tax liens or judgments or notice of pendencies, but it's a good place to start to make sure that the person you're talking to that's selling you that house does in fact own it, has title in order to sign the authority to sell it.
People will try to sell their house even though it's not their house.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
obviously seen it over and over again.
Yeah.
So I would say 75% of our joint venture deals are with somebody who doesn't know to call you or anybody in the business in escrow. And they really don't even know if they have a valid contract, right? So purchasing a property is a fairly intimidating process for a lot of people.
Right.
I mean, obviously, and it gets kind of weird because after we've done this for a while, everything has too many zeros on it, right? Like, you end up talking in thousands, even in a weird day-to-day life situation. It's like, oh, it's like $5,000. I mean, $50.
Yeah.
Contracts become like escrow instructions, right? What the standardized stuff is, the back end of an escrow instructions. You know what the stuff you added in from the contract is, like the front of the escrow instructions. The proper parts to read. You look at a prelim, like the first 8 items are likely like standard, and then the rest of them
There's
are.
a whole lot of boilerplate.
Yeah,
and then add in your terms and conditions onto the boilerplate.
Absolutely. And so, if you were brand new, right, and you wanted to feel prepared before you called an escrow company or started the purchase process, how do you think someone should prepare to ensure they're going to have a successful transaction with you?
I think knowing the key points, your buyer, your seller, your sales price, actual contact information, just to get started. I don't know. What do you think?
I think if I were an investor and I made an offer on a property and I wanted to make sure that it was going to go through, I would find out information on the seller.
Yeah.
I would call my escrow company and say, hey, I'm entertaining making an offer on Main Street in Riverside. Can you run a check on it? Tell me who the owner is, what the taxes are, you see anything? And we can get that information easily from a title insurance company. And then once you make the offer, be realistic. You're not going to open escrow on this real quick cash deal and close it in 5 days. It's not going to happen. It has happened.
It does happen sometimes.
Well, it's not going to happen in your first deal.
I'm with Donna. It's just
It's,
like,
it
should
don't
happen
stress
fast.
yourself out. Don't stress yourself out. Tell the seller to be prepared. Ask the seller key questions like, are you the sole owner of this property? Is your husband dead? Are
did
you
you acquire the
divorced? Are you
property?
just, you have the right to ask those questions because you're entering into a contract with this person to pay him a lot of money for something. So ask those key questions. Are you the owner of this property? If there is anybody else on title, are they local? Are they available to sign? Because we're going to be gathering signatures from them. And find out right up front if we've got relatives that are indisposed, unavailable, or what have you. So as an investor, if I were making an offer on a property today, I would get that information up front and then go talk to my escrow officer and go forward with it.
So basically, from what I'm gathering, 90% of the problems you have are chain of title family problems.
Chain of title thin.
Just who's the owner, how do they hold it,
Some
how
type
do they
of cloud
acquire
on
it?
title, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
cloud issues.
And remember too, I know a lot of investors open or assignee. Steve McKee, am I going to buy this property or assignee? Well, we're going to start off everything with you as the buyer. You come along at the 11th hour and say, oh, I'm signing this to CRG or to the Keller organization, whatever. stop, we gotta go back, we've gotta get more paperwork signed, we gotta go back to the seller. We just can't instantaneously assign it over. There's a series of paperwork we have to get to protect you and the seller that it's being done properly. So any delay or obstacle that we give you isn't because we're trying to slow the transaction down. It's trying to keep your butt, my butt, and the seller's butt out of litigation.
Okay, so that's a really interesting. I didn't think about this until now. Like, there's probably 30 people in this room that think they want to wholesale a deal. You know, I mean, wholesaling is generally better off left to people who are really experienced because it's more difficult than a regular purchase. That being said, if somebody, we're transitioning to wholesaling as this market gets tighter and tighter, approaching what we believe is like the 2020, market's kind of fuzzy. This thing could go on for a while, but I want to get out of the short-term market. You're going to be hearing from us. Actually, I'm going to tell you now in front of the audience. You're going to be getting a lot of wholesale calls from us because we're wholesaling stuff off. If somebody were to wholesale, when is the best time to substitute the buyer in the escrow?
Well, let me ask you a question. So you're wholesaling it, which means that you've got the seller, you've got the wholesaler, and you have the ultimate buyer,
Yep.
right? When are you getting your money?
During the escrow process.
During the escrow, outside of escrow from the buyer?
No, inside escrow.
Inside, okay. That's going to be disclosed to the seller.
Correct.
Okay, so if you come along and you enter into a contract with the seller to buy his property at $150,000, you're going to wholesale it, and you're going to sell it to Keller over here for $200,000. You've just made $50,000.
Yes.
That's going to be disclosed in escrow to the seller that this property is being assigned for a profit to the Keller organization, and the Keller organization is going to pay CRG X amount of dollars for wholesaling it. So it's better to do that earlier in the transaction, so the paperwork that we prepare is signed with the proper names and things on it.
I brought that up for that exact reason.
Yeah.
Because, so whenever I do a wholesale transaction, I haven't done one in a while, but previously, because I have a license, obviously it's a little more of an issue, right? Because secret profit. So for those of you who don't know, if you have a real estate license and you wholesale a deal non-disclosed, it's called secret profit. It's totally against like BRE regulation. I have to have somebody sign a disclosure that says, I understand that Stephen is not in working in my fiduciary best interest.
Yeah.
You know, he's selling the property for a profit.
Right.
And then I always have the language that says something to the effect of, I as a seller are agreeing to sell at a discount due to circumstance, condition, whatever the case may be.
Right.
So that everybody's transparent in the process. And, you know, I'm essentially trading my experience, right, for a piece of their equity.
Exactly.
So in a lot of transactions, generally not stuff that we send you, but stuff that like I get with like a random escrow company that somebody has open escrow with. We're at day 14 of 15, right? And they're trying to cram a wholesale deal together. What problems do you see arise when somebody's signed 100% of the escrow paperwork, disclosures, whatever, and then they try and, you know, assign the buyer or do a substitution of buyer?
I mean, it's excuse me, logistically, it doesn't create that big of a problem, except now we've got to go back and have the assignment signed. Has the seller been aware of it all this time? Sellers are nervous by nature. You enter into an escrow, you think you're nervous as the investor, that seller is sitting on pins and needles till he gets his check.
You have to remember
So-
that seller may not be local, so now
Yeah. So
it's just
the
hard.
more paperwork you introduce to that seller throughout the escrow, it just makes for that much harder of a transaction. What's going on? Why is this being sold? Who is this person? What happened to my original buyer? So if you can address those issues at the onset, you're going to have an easier transaction than waiting 2, 3, 4 weeks into the transaction.
So
Something you two could help with, like what are all the documents needed?
I got you, Jim. I'm going right there with you. So in the beginning, right, if now somebody's heard this and they want to be properly prepared, what exactly should they be conveying to the seller, and what documentation should you prepare for them in the beginning?
Well, when you write your offer to the seller, you are telling the seller, as you stated, that you are buying this for resale and profit, and you reserve the right to assign it. So the seller should know that, and you should explain that to him. Maybe you have that investor ready to purchase. Maybe you're out looking for him. I don't know. But I think just remember full disclosure to the seller.
100%.
you know, sellers are if you end up in a court of law, it's been my experience, the sellers usually prevail because they're the parties that are hurt. Well, I didn't know, I didn't understand. You're the professional. I don't have a real estate agent representing me. So those are all red flags. So red flags working with elderly people. You approach a person that's elderly and the title companies, everybody's all over that now because there's so much abuse of the elderly in this marketplace. So, you know, when you sit down with the grandma at the table and she's signing a purchase agreement with you and she's not quite understanding what she's signing, but her 25 or 30-year-old son is sitting next to her. Here, Mom, sign. It's okay, Mom, I've got it covered. Watch that. Because those are the issues that we have in this industry that, you know, they don't fully understand what they're signing and they're having some relative of their family pushing them into doing something. And again, you're working in a type of property that kind of drags that in.
So without talking about clients, you know, obviously clients' names, individual properties, do you guys have circumstance where, even recently, where you've seen, I guess you probably see this a lot, but elder abuse, we have like a lot of children sort of closing deals?
I had a phone call about 2 months ago from a real estate agent in town. She was trying to list a property out in Eastvale, and it was an elderly lady, and the cleaning lady or some lady that was in the home for a long time kept making her deed the property back and forth between the two of them, and they were all uninsured deeds. And now this lady that was in her home for years, and was an elderly, wealthy lady, now gave 50% interest up, and the elderly lady wanted to sell the home, and now she can't because this lady who was part of her life for a long time has a 50% interest in her home. And the agent called me and said, what should we do? And I said, call a lawyer. Like,
Exactly.
there's nothing we can do. I can't convince somebody to deed a property back to the elderly lady, and obviously she wasn't aware that she was doing what she was doing.
Jim and I had a deal a few years ago where there was, I don't particularly think the seller was elderly, but the seller was a little off, just not quite 100%. And she had a young man, probably 20 years, maybe 15 years her junior, that was with her every time they came into the office and would over-explain. I would explain something and this young man would kind of like hold her hand and walk her through it. It was just an odd relationship. And I asked Jim about it. Who is this guy? What's his story? And there was really no relationship as far as family or anything like that. He just kind of attached onto her. So it gets time to close escrow, and she wants me to prepare an amendment where a good portion of her proceeds are being paid to this guy. And I said, no, I won't do it. Because I just did not feel comfortable that who this person was. He wasn't a child, a grandchild. He was just a young man who attached on to this kind of disparaging woman who probably needed better representation, and I wouldn't do it. And I said, I will pay your proceeds to you, and you can do whatever you want with your proceeds once you leave my escrow.
Yeah.
So, I don't see that often, but I do see it, and if I see something like that on a deal, I don't care who the client is. This was Jim buying a property. I hold up a red flag because, you know, we're trained to look for those red flags.
No,
and that was a red flag to me.
And I think too, though, we meet a lot of the clients face to face. So like we said, the first thing we do is we call them. Make sure, do you really want to sell your house to Stephen?
Well, we don't say, do you want to sell your house, but
No.
we make sure that
And we
yeah.
make sure that they are aware
they
of
are
what
who
they're
they say
doing.
they are
And,
and things. Yeah.
But we try to send either one of our staff members or a notary to them to sign their paperwork. So we want to know who they are and make sure, and it's not that we don't trust you guys, it's just we want to make sure that everyone's safe, that everyone is in a safe transaction. So that's kind of our job to, you know, protect you, protect us, and protect the seller. So we try to do one-on-one contact with them. And that one-on-one contact probably saved that lady's, you know, however much money she was netting.
No, I mean, I had a friend of a friend who ran a very large senior care facility, like end-of-life care. Mm-hmm. And it was like they live in a home and they move into a hospice, then eventually they die at the facility. And some people spend the last 30 years of their life there. And she ran into, on a weekly basis, tons of elderly abuse cases where children are coming in and trying, you know, trying to take large, and this is a fairly expensive place to buy into. It was like $150,000 to $250,000 buy-in, right? These are fairly wealthy people, and they're trying to sort of coax them into this purchase. And I realize that's not what this whole event, this thing's supposed to be about, is elderly abuse. But I mean, this is a very big issue with
It's a
purchasing
very
right
big
now,
issue,
right? I mean, you guys probably see more of this instance than just about anything else.
Well, that and fighting family
Yeah, I
members.
think more family
Family members, really, mom and dad are dead and the kids are selling the property, and that, I think that's a big issue, because we're dealing with the population now where people are dying. I mean, the baby
Yeah.
boomers are dying, and we have a lot of senior citizens and estates and probates that are being sold, and more so than in any time in my career. So we're seeing these things pop up, and fighting family members is a big issue.
So this is, I mean, talking about this, all of this makes sense in my head, but I feel like this is very scary to a lot of people who are trying to get into this industry. And it sounds like you're essentially taking care of all of it until something comes up that you can't get past.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I know that's the case because that's what happens in our transactions. But when these issues come up, and if I was a new person, right, and you were to come back to me with this issue, do you generally give that person advice on the right person to call to resolve it, or what can I expect if you call me
No,
with
all
an
we
issue?
can really do, I mean, we're not attorneys, we're not giving legal advice, we're not telling you how to solve a problem. We're saying, this is the problem that's on the table. If it's a seller problem and they have to resolve it, they may have to contact their attorney or their CPA or whatever. If Mr. Buyer can't continue with the purchase because there's clouds on title, and I say, hey, we can't proceed until this and this and this. Properties in this situation, there's a lot of properties out there that have notice of pendencies on them or code compliance. Jim knows very well, working with the county of San Bernardino and Riverside, you're a government agency. I mean, you're going to have to go get in their face to try and get them to waive that $100,000 lien because there's been trash on the property for 25 years. So those hold up title, and you're going to know that when you go into looking at the property. If you have a screwed up property that's distressed, there's been trash on it, there's going to be a notice of compliance filed on it. And I can't go to the city and fight those battles for you. All I can do is tell you, this is what's recorded. You've got to go to the county or the city and fight those battles.
Okay, so, so essentially, when we just talked about, you gave me, like you said, you have to go to the city and do this. Like, here's your source of the problem. Have you, I think we're coming in on time, have you seen, I don't know if you have any stories recently, have you seen anything where somebody was fairly inexperienced or fairly new, and they brought somebody else in a deal where they couldn't solve a problem that would like successfully close because they brought somebody knowledgeable in? Have you seen any like handoffs in that way? If you, like, you called them and said, you got to solve this, and they're like, I don't know what to do, and then they found somebody to fix it?
Well, there's sources out there. I mean, I've had people, I tell them that they're going to need to find a real estate attorney to clear up the cloud on title. We can refer them to an arm's list of attorneys in Riverside County. To be honest, in answer to your question, no. I mean, I really haven't had a transaction that's been stalled, but then they brought in a back man with an expert that cleaned it up. I mean, a lot of it is just diligence on the seller's part or the buyer's part to address the issues that are on the property.
So it either fails or somebody continues.
And we
to
have
push
had, a lot of
along
us was
the-
canceled because sometimes they just can't get cleaned up. They can't resolve. So
Interesting.
not everything, if you have a bad property and the circumstances, maybe that guy's going to sell it 5 years down the road, but he's got some quiet title action. He's got some issues he's going to have to take care of legally before he can get there. And again, that's not all property. We're talking about the extremes and the exceptions. I mean, we close hundreds of deals a month for investors who buy and sell and close a property in 30 days. So it does happen. All I'm saying, as an investor, a flipper, know your property, know your seller when you enter into it, get a feel for what you're dealing with. Don't just write an offer and, I saw grandma at the table on Sunday afternoon and all is well. Kind of, who's selling this? What's going on? What's the circumstances? If you gather that information before you get to escrow, the chances of you closing that escrow are far greater than if you just walk in blindly with a contract.
So lastly, do you have any advice for people on ways to prepare for the end of a transaction to make sure they're protected? So people have issues like somebody moving out, whether it's a tenant or an occupant, short sale overlap where the short sale is closing, that tenant's supposed to get cash for keys, miscellaneous circumstance where somebody's leaving or supposed to do something either at close or after close of escrow, other ways to protect themselves?
Okay, well, we really stop at the close of escrow process. So possession is completely out of our
Okay.
game. So if I close at most contracts, if you write a standard purchase contract, most contracts say the buyer gets possession at 6 o'clock on the day of recording. Well, if you go to the house at 6 o'clock on the day of recording and Mr. Seller's there, you're gonna have to call the sheriff to have him evicted. You can't come back to escrow. There's nothing that myself or the title company can do about that.
So have there
So-
been instances where, and this is a little bit of a leading question because I know the answer, but what provisions have you put in place at close to help ensure that compliance is met on the way out, like holdbacks or, lease backs or things like that to make sure there's compliance or help compliance on the sale?
If you're going to write a contract and close escrow today, and you're going to allow the seller to remain in the property for a rent back, your contract needs to say, and we can put it in our escrow instructions, but we can't enforce it. You
Yes.
have it in your escrow instructions, you have it in your contract. If it doesn't work out, you go to the court and you say, he signed a contract, judge, and the judge is gonna make his determination who's gonna prevail. But if you have a seller that's going to remain in the property following the close of escrow, then you need to enter into a rental agreement with that seller, particularly if he's gonna stay there. I mean, if he's staying there for 2 or 3 days to vacate, you monitor it, he has to be out 2 or 3 days. If he's not, you're gonna call the sheriff. If you're going to allow him to rent the property back for a month or 45 days or whatever, enter into a rental agreement. You're now a landlord-tenant relationship once that escrow closes.
But we don't create the rental.
We don't create the rental
Has
agreements.
nothing to do with you.
Nothing to do with us. But to protect yourself, you're now changed it. You're not a buyer-seller relationship. You're a landlord-tenant relationship. And if you need to evict that tenant, you're gonna have to go through the normal laws that govern evictions, and you're gonna need a rental agreement.
So what's your take on holdbacks, right? A seller proceed holdback in
We don't
exchange for
like them.
vacancy?
I
I brought that up because we've
Yeah,
had an issue lately, so that's why.
we
I
will do a
asked.
holdback, but a holdback, let's say that you're holding back X amount of dollars of the seller's proceeds pending him doing something, a repair, cleaning up trash, whatever it may be. Our holdback agreement, we don't want it to be more than 30 days. I want that money out of escrow. There has to be a definite drop-dead date that if, in the event in 30 days, if Mr. Seller has not done A, B, C, this money is going to be released to the buyer and we're out of the picture. There's no automatic forfeitures. You can't say, well, other than the holdback. During the course of escrow, people will say, I want the buyer's earnest money deposit forfeited to me in 15 days if he doesn't do something. We don't do automatic forfeitures. So, because you want us to release an amendment, give me a signed mutual instruction. So holdbacks we don't like. We will do them, but we will do them on a limited basis for a very specific period of time and very specific performance taking place. Something happening.
But she'll give you a dirty look when you
Yeah.
email the request over.
I know because, well, I don't get to see the dirty look. I just get the like, why did he send this to me?
Yeah.
We don't have them, I mean, because we only have to purchase about 25% of our properties through you because usually the seller has selected an escrow company. Usually it's their problem, right? But we've had a couple instances where we work together. We've had holdbacks and they're a giant pain in the ass.
Well, we had a major holdback how many years and it
Yes.
never got resolved and I only would hold it for 30 days, so we shipped it over to First American Trust,
Yep.
who's holding it for
No,
God
it's
knows an
closed. That
indefinite
deal's
period.
closed, by the way.
Pardon me?
The deal's settled.
Thank God.
I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you about it later. Yes,
Oh,
we settled
gosh,
that deal.
she was a piece
The other thing I'd like to bring up to investors, when you're buying a property, think about what entity you're buying it. Are you buying it as an individual? Are you buying it as an LLC? Are you a corporation? Have those documentations ready when you open escrow. If you've established an LLC, limited liability company, or a partnership, have all of that documentation available to give to your escrow officer on the day you open escrow. Because the first thing I'm going to do with it, I'm going to submit it to the title and company who's going to review it, and they're going to come back and say, yes, we accept this documentation. We will insure them as CRG or Keller organization, or they're going to say, nope, this organization is not in good standing with the state of California. We won't insure them into that name.
Just had that happen.
So make sure, again, if you're buying it as an individual, if you have a spouse, she's going to have to sign something. If you're buying it as an LLC, give us that paperwork at the very onset of the escrow. If you're a corporation, you have to be in good standing with the state of California. So things to enter in, think about on your end when you're entering into an escrow.
So, good advice. Are there any other last minute tips other than that you would like to give to a new person who maybe has no idea what they're doing? Late
Wait,
escrow.
my notes?
I'm like, you've got 3 pages of notes. I'm like, there's got to be something in there.
She went over most of it.
No, I really covered it.
I think my thing is communication. I think communication is key, whether you're a real estate agent doing a regular resale or an investor, because I'm the one that has to make the phone call at the beginning. And just know your person, know who you're buying from, know who your players are. One of the guys said earlier, have your community. So have your key players, have your title company, your escrow company, if you're working with an agent, and keep it consistent. Don't flop around. If I could suggest anything, we have a group of investors that we work with and we love it. They all are a little different, but we know how they all work and we know who all their team players are, and it really keeps it nice and consistent. So
even when we send idiotic emails and screw up half the beginning
I
transaction.
just get the email. We only check our emails between 1 and 3:30.
Oh, I got.
After 4 o'clock.
What, hold on. I had a meeting with Donna, and Donna said, I tell the entire team, it says right on the email that we only check emails at 11 and 4.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
But I need an
don't
answer
like
at
that.
2.
Well, it says, and if it's an emergency, call the office.
Yeah, and pick up the phone. I think that's another thing. People don't pick up the phone anymore. Just call somebody. Don't wait for an email. Just pick up the phone and call whoever you're trying to work with, or the escrow company or the title company. Don't be afraid to actually talk to somebody, because you can write anything down in an email. So just
No,
I
totally.
think the biggest thing is disclosure.
I agree.
I think you're not going to have any secret deals that you aren't telling the seller. You aren't going to, well, I don't want him to know this, but I'm really doing this. Disclosure. If you tell me, the seller's going to know.
Yeah.
So we don't keep secrets. We don't do things where we'll hide it. It's full disclosure. It's not, quite frankly, I love you guys and I get repetitive business. I love that. But that one escrow fee that I earn on a transaction is not worth the possible lawsuit or fees that I would pay on the backside. So disclosure. And it's easy if you're just an honest person. You disclose everything to your clients, buyer, seller, maybe.
Totally agree. Okay. I pull questions, but we're running really late. Can you guys thank Donna and Anna for coming out?